Today is May 3rd, 2013. We are at the American Legion in Peoria, Illinois. We are currently interviewing Mr. Frank Rezac. Mr. Rezac was born in Effingham, Illinois on 11/22/1944. My name is Cheryl Walker. I am with the Illinois State Library. Tabitha McLean will be the court reporter. And Mr. Rezac, can you state for the record what branch of service you were in?
I was really an Illinois Guardsman, the Illinois Air National Guard, and by virtue of the fact that I was an Illinois Guardsman then, involved in the reserve side of the United States Air Force. I was on active duty for basic training. That was Title 10 status. When I went to pilot training with the United States Air Force, I was in Title 32 for training status. So I spent some time in the Air Force on active duty, but it was for training directed by the governor. And the rest of the time I was Illinois Air National Guard.
So how many days active duty were you?
Oh, I don't know.
You don't know.
My retirement, retirement is based on how many points of active duty you have. They have different rules for guardsmen, like I couldn't count all of the active duty days because guardsmen at the time were only allowed to count so many pay dates towards retirement points. But when I retired, I believe I had 4,700 points. So the active duty would be, I'm guessing, somewhere in the 2000 period maybe, or the 1500. I'd have to go back and count, all the annual training, different tours and stuff like that. Pilot training was 300. Well, I was there probably for 14 months, so just in that it would be about 500 points.
So were you a pilot?
I was.
Okay. And what type of
the standard pilot training airplanes, A-37 or T-37s, T-41's first airplane, T-37, T-38. Then I came back to the unit at Peoria, flew U-3s while we were waiting for the O-2s to be produced. Flew U-3 A's and B's, then O-2 A's and B's. Then was kind of dual current in that unit equipped airplane, but I also flew the T-29 and then the C-131, which were support airplanes. Then I guess the next airplane we transitioned to was the T-37, and then we made a conversion to F-16. So before we could do F-16s, I had to go back to fighter lead-in school, which there I flew AT-38s, and then I came back and flew the F-16A and B.
As a pilot, how many flight hours did you have to have per week?
It wasn't by week, but there were annual and semi-annual minimums, and then there were requirements for currency. And that changed probably 4 times during my career. Initially, you just had to have so many hours. You had to shoot so many instrument approaches, precision approaches, non-precision. You had to have so many lands. You had to have a landing every 45 days, 30 when you're inexperienced, then 45. But it varied depending on what the missions were and that type of stuff. And my guess would be I ended up my career, I didn't fly the last, let's see, from 94 to 2003. I just flew the desk. So I flew basically from 1968 to about the end of 93. And then that period of time I had 4,990 hours. I think it was 10 hours short of being 5,000 hours.
Okay.
So whatever that average, but it varies. I mean, every year it was a little bit different. It depended on what you did, how many exercises you went on, things like that.
Okay, I'm going to come back to that, but I have a question. When you say you flew the desk, what do you mean? Well,
I went down to the headquarters. I was appointed by the governor, and that job is not a flying job anymore. General officers don't fly unless they have an instructor pilot with them. That's a waste of time. Only certain general officers can. Wing commanders who are in charge of a flying wing can still fly. Otherwise, general officers, unless they're in a combat command, do not fly. They may get a little stick time here and there, but they're not recognized as flying anymore. It's not a flying assignment. Requires rated experience, but not, you don't have to, you don't fly anymore, which is kind of a bad deal because you lose your flight pay. So
Do you lose your license?
I never had a license.
You never had a license.
I'm probably one of the few, but I was Air Force rated. I never got a license from the FAA. Didn't care to fly. Never wanted to rent an airplane. Thought about flying for the airlines, but when I came back from pilot training, they were not hiring unless you had tons of hours because there was a glut of pilots back at that time. And so I just said, I like to fly military airplanes.
Okay. Now going back to your flight hours and things like that, and you said that you had to have so many types of landings. I'm assuming that was takeoffs too.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So did that include, like, you had to take so many landings from sea?
I was not a Navy guy. I was not a carrier pilot. No way.
Okay.
Only Navy and Marine guys do that. Not even all the Navy and Marine guys are carrier qualified, I don't believe. So no, we didn't do any carrier kind of stuff.
Okay. So when you would do flight hours, how many hours per flight would you be up?
It depended on what airplane you were flying. In the early days when we were flying O2s, it was not uncommon to fly for 3 or 4 hours. The T-29 and 131, you flew whatever the needs of the mission were. You went from point A to point B hauling people or stuff. The F-16, those rides were usually maybe an hour and 20 minutes because of fuel. The A-37, unless you were doing air refueling, about an hour and 30 minutes was about as much as you'd get out of it. Depending on what you do in the mission. If you're just going to high altitude and cruising, you can fly a lot longer than if you're down low, popping up, doing tactical stuff.
There is a lot of times you'll see, especially with the Air Guard, you'll see pilots or Air Guard planes taking off, and you'll hear people say, "Oh, I wonder if they're going to go play golf." That's not true.
I've seen people use airplanes incorrectly, and I've seen them lose their wings and their positions in units.
They're actually going on missions or flights.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And those planes are actually full for whatever reason.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the kind of airplane
Mm-hmm.
that you're flying. F-16s, A-37s that were flown out of Peoria had fuel on them. The F-16 had a captive AIM-9 missile system that you went up and practiced air to air. You could go to the range. We carried small bombs, marking bomb kind of things. That's the easiest way I can explain it to you. The gun was loaded. We'd take off and go to Volk Field or over to Atterbury and shoot on the range. You'd drop your bombs, you'd shoot your bullets, you'd come back home. Depends on the kind of mission. Some are low altitude. Nothing is loaded on the airplane other than the fuel. But it's navigation kind of things, all kinds of different events that are done to keep current in every phase of the training that's required.
Okay. So you're gonna clear up a lot of things for a lot of people.
Okay.
So you were in Peoria,
Mm-hmm.
and you were a pilot there, and did you have other duties there in Peoria?
Well, it depended. If you look at the bio, I mean, I started out just as a squadron pilot, and then I did a period where I was the intelligence officer as well as a pilot. I was a plans officer as well as being a pilot. I ran the standardization evaluation program for a period of years where you evaluated all the pilots and made sure everybody was following the same procedures the same way, the right way. I was the commander of the Director Support Center Squadron Flight, which is a command and control element that controls pilots in theaters of operations, gets them from where they're taking off to where they're going to deliver their ordnance, coordinates it with reconnaissance, airlift, all kinds of stuff like that. And then I was the squadron commander of the fighter squadron, and was the wing commander out here at Peoria when we had the F-16s.
Okay. I noticed that you first were enlisted and then you became commissioned. What made you go in as an enlisted personnel and then become commissioned?
Well, right out of high school, I went in the seminary. I went to a Catholic high school here in Peoria, and I went in the seminary, and I stayed in the seminary for, I guess, about 2.5 years. I was going to Loyola University in Chicago. When I left the seminary, I was past the point of being able to get in the ROTC program. So I was kind of talking to the Army recruiters, and I figured, boom, I'll just go in the Army, I'll go do my thing, come back and get a master's degree. And then I came home one weekend and went with my dad to wire a guy's house for sound, and he was in the Guard. And he said, you know, we're looking for pilots out there. You really need to look at that. And I said, you need to talk to my brother, not me. I'm just going to go get this thing done and be done with it. Didn't really have much interest in the military. And he talked me into taking the test, and I did. And so once they select you to go, you have to go in enlisted until your slot comes for pilot training. So I went in. I was an admin clerk. Learned how to go through the in-basket and post publications. And one day they called and said, you're going to meet your promotion board. And I did, and became a lieutenant and went to pilot training. And the rest was history.
Going in and then becoming an officer and going through pilot training, did you still have to go to officer training?
Not at the time. Now, currently, if someone was going that same route and going to go in, they would have to go to officer candidate school. Guard didn't have their own officer candidate school at the time. In fact, now they don't either, and everyone's sent through the active duty program. In the Air Guard side, that is. Army, I think, still has their deal there. But at the time, if you had a college degree and you were going to pilot training and you had been to basic training, where you learned your basic military, you know, marching and all the military things you learn in basic training, you were just given a direct commission in the Guard system. So I literally was doing KP on a Saturday, and on a Sunday I was a second lieutenant. That's how it worked.
Okay. As you rose through the ranks in the Army, they have different levels of training for officers. Do they have that in the Air Force?
Yeah, you're expected to take some courses either by correspondence or in residence, Squadron Officer School course, Air Command and Staff, Air War College. I completed those, and at the time it was called Industrial College of the Armed Forces, but I also completed National Security Management. So, and I was fortunate because I was able to do that very early on. As I got older in the system, the rules changed, and you had to have a certain rank before you could take some of those courses. But I was kind of prior to that point in time, so by the time I was a major, I guess I had completed all of the courses that I needed, with the exception of War College, for the rest of my career. So it just worked out that way. You know?
With War College, did you have to be asked to go to War College? No, you just...
Yeah, you can apply, and there's different. I did it by correspondence, and you can. Well, I did the National Security Management by correspondence. The War College was done via seminar, and that was done at the unit in Peoria. And I had already completed National Security Management, so I didn't need to take War College. The two are equivalent, and really, when I took it, ICAP probably was more prestigious than War College at the time. It's taught out of Fort McNair. So they needed one more guy for the seminar to make a seminar, so they came and said, we know you're done with this, but would you agree to be in the seminar, and then we could get a seminar formed. So I said, okay, I'll do that. So I actually took 2 courses that are required. Only one of those is required. Either one would make you eligible for Brigadier General, but I had completed both of them, which confused the promotion board enormously because they had not seen that. It was great.
Did, okay, you were promoted to Brigadier General,
Mm-hmm.
and you were you promoted to that rank before you came to Springfield?
No, no, no. I was a federal technician when I was at Peoria, and I went to Springfield as a federal technician, knowing that the adjutant general wanted to see me, Don Lynn, General Lynn, wanted to see me appointed as assistant adjutant general. But that's a political appointment. So once I was appointed by the governor to be the assistant adjutant general and was put in for the board and was promoted to general officer, then I had to give up my federal position and go to work for the state. Because you can't be, there's manning documents that are built for full-time people, and there is no general officer billet at the unit at Peoria or at Springfield on the air side unless it's a state position. So at that time, now I think they've added one since 2003. So yeah, it's crazy. And the Army has added, they've got all kinds of generals down there now. I think they've got four or five general officer positions in what used to be 2. So,
Okay, a Brigadier General, is that, how many stars is that?
1.
1 star.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, it's Brigadier General, Major General, Lieutenant General, and then just General. It's a 4-star. And like Crumry he would be right now a federally recognized Brigadier General, but he's not federally recognized as a 2-star. He can wear that in the state, but if he goes out of the state, he has to take one of the stars off, unless they've changed the rule, until he has time and grade as a Brigadier General federally, and then can be promoted as a 2-star. I'm not sure how they did that in his case, because he was not a line officer, I wouldn't think, as a chaplain. So they had to do something special there to get him promoted, because that's not a line. I don't think it may be a line officer promotion now, but we've had previous adjutants general, a guy named Dick Austin, who's kind of a character down in Springfield. You might have heard of him. He actually served, I think, as the head of maybe the GAO or something in DC under one of the presidents, and he was considered a major general in the state of Illinois, but was never more than a full colonel federally. So it's 2 different systems. You have 2 different, you can be a Brigadier General in the Illinois Air National Guard and a colonel federally recognized. In my case, I was a Brigadier General in both, but you have to go through the federal boards. Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Probably confusing.
So I'm sure you had to ready troops for going overseas.
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever go overseas?
Only for short tours. I spent some time in Central America. I spent some time in Germany. Just a couple of trips over to, one trip I guess only to Japan. But no, I didn't. I was just in that part of the Cold War, I guess, if you will, when the first Gulf War started, Desert Storm, Desert Shield. They wouldn't let anybody in the Guard over the rank of major go. The active duty did not want Guard people in charge of anything. And that was kind of not a good time between the Guard and the Air Force. They finally relented on that later on, and more Guardsmen got to be in charge of things. So, and enlisted ranks, if you were a master sergeant you were lucky to go. Senior masters and chief masters were not allowed to go in the first Gulf War. Second Gulf War, they wanted them because they realized they had the leadership capability. But it was just kind of an active duty guard kind of thing, if you will.
Even though it was a volunteer army or volunteer service, they didn't want the senior leaders going over there.
Exactly. Exactly. That all changed. It really all changed. There were some leadership changes in the Army and the Air that made some differences in that particular thing. And people were expressing their, their dismay to their congressional representatives, saying, "Can't go, got too much rank." It was really an interesting time. So.
I'm amazed about that. Didn't know that. With what is your position on telling people, young people, if they come to you, that they're wanting to join the service? What is your opinion, or how do you approach talk to them about that?
I encourage them to do it, assuming, I always tell them, if you're screwing with drugs, don't waste my time. You don't belong there. Not a good thing. If you can't follow orders, if you're not willing to be a follower before you become a leader, don't waste your time. But if you want to take the time and invest it, you will have a new appreciation of the flag, you will have a new appreciation of your country, and you will understand more than you want to know about government. It's a great thing. I personally kind of wish they would restore the draft.
And why is that?
I just think, I shouldn't say the draft maybe as much as some mandatory service of some type, so that people have the opportunity to do that.
You, having been in the service in some capacity from the 60s to the 21st century, saw a lot of change. You went through, maybe not involved in conflict, war, and you saw how different troops coming home, communications, transportation was all different sexes were able to join at different points, how they were treated. How do you feel it has all been evolved?
Oh, I think it's been really great. I really believe that we eventually got to where we should have been much earlier than that. There's still a lot of friction between the reserve components and the active duty, because there's not a lot of communication that takes place at the right levels. And some predetermined notions that people have on both sides cause all kinds of difficulties in making the relationships work really good. But there's no question about just the increase in ability that the military has today. Some of that comes with technology of the weapon systems. Some of it probably I think is not as good as it used to be. I think we have way too many civilian contractors involved. I think we have a hard time managing them. I think people have a hard time keeping track of the purse strings. I think some of the major airplane companies in the country are really taking advantage of the largesse of the American taxpayer. Every time I read in any forum that a big company has to pay the government a huge fine for doing something that's not right, that to me just smacks of difficulty, because I see, especially the enlisted people who are not paid all that much, being told you'll follow orders, you'll do the right thing, you'll salute smartly, you'll be on time, you'll do what you have to for this country. And then I see companies just taking advantage of that. I'm short on patience on that. Let me just say that. And that part of the military, I'm not a real big fan of the military-industrial complex kind of thing. I think we've slipped into some kind of bad issues there. And I just think there's companies that take advantage of the military. I think they just take advantage of the whole situation. I don't know if that makes sense to you. We could go for hours on that. If I was king for a day, I would say no general officer works for Boeing or Lockheed or any of those big companies. Not when they retire, not ever. You have your choice. You're either going to be a military officer or you're going to go work for a company like that. But too many, after they get out, do crazy things. You know, Secretary of the Air Force, one of the assistant secretaries of the Air Force went to prison for lining up jobs for her relatives while she was the one making the selection of weapon systems. Crazy. I'm off on a tangent. Okay, anyway.
No, that's fine.
Yeah, that's the part that I don't think has changed well over the years.
Do you think having women being able to fight in combat and become pilots, and you know, the commercial for U.S. Air Force and for, I think, the Air Guard, it says, no, I'm a pilot. I wanted to be a medical doctor. It's a wonderful commercial. But how do you feel about that?
That should have happened a long time ago. I selected a female to be the first female pilot in the Guard at Peoria. The biggest I've ever got my butt kicked in an air-to-air battle was by a female Canadian pilot. I think her call sign was Powder Puff. She was tough. She was flying a CF-18 over the range out by Gila Bend, and she knew what she was doing. I have no problem with women doing just about everything. I think there's a few things that, just because of living conditions and the fact that you may have to put men and women in such close quarters, it may cause some, I don't know, unease. But if the people involved are easy with it, okay, then I guess that's okay too. But I have not had a problem with ever putting women in charge of anything.
Okay, but getting back.
Huge change. I can remember the drill weekend, and it happened the same weekend. We had our first African American and our first woman in the unit the same weekend. Boom. I mean, big news on the base, you know.
But coming down after being kicked by Powder Puff, how much Raz did you get?
Not much.
You didn't?
No, not much.
Okay.
Powder Puff might not be right, but it's something close to that. I wish I could remember it. I mean, she was really a neat person, and she really knew tactics. And we talked about that for a long time.
But to be that confident to choose that feminine of a call name speaks a lot about her.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
That's
Absolutely.
Great. That's great.
Yeah.
So.
Pebbles, not Powder Puff, Pebbles.
Well, Pebbles is
there
pretty.
Pebbles. Pebbles. Call up the Canadian Air Force and say, hey, what's the name of your pilot that went by the handle of Pebbles in 1993?
And I don't think your call name was Bambi.
No.
So what was your call name?
I really didn't have one. They called me Collar because I had been in the seminary. That was, but we weren't big on call signs out here in Peoria. Now Springfield was huge on call signs. Peoria never was. I don't know why the difference, but I don't know. Some of it just it just didn't, you know, Frank is fine with me, and
So,
Jim and Tom, and
so like in World War II, where you didn't have your call names.
had our names on the side of airplanes. Some of us did. There weren't enough airplanes for everybody, but the senior people in the unit did.
So, you said you had one son that was.
No, I have one son who's a pilot out here. I have another son who's a lieutenant colonel, hopefully soon to be a colonel. He's at the Guard Bureau, the National Guard Bureau. He's the position he's going to be going to is I think it's director of readiness for the civil engineering for the Air National Guard, nationally, not just state unit, but across the country. My youngest son is a pilot, a 130 pilot out here at the Air Guard.
Did you have two children that followed you in the footsteps of the
I have
service?
5 kids. My oldest boy can't take part, would love to, is probably the most patriotic out of all 5 kids, but was born with a blood clot, and so he's lucky to be where he is now. We're lucky that he is where he is now, and you know, he'd love to be in the military but can't do it. So then my second oldest boy is the boy who's out in D.C. at Andrews Air Force Base, and my daughter is very prissy and would not have anything to do with the military. She saw enough of that jazz, so she's a teacher. And then my second youngest boy is a police officer here in Peoria. And my youngest is a cop or a pilot.
So, is there anything else you'd like to share?
No, I mean, it was a great career. I miss the people every day. You know, I'd go back in a heartbeat if I could. I'm too old to do that. I sometimes wish Governor Blagojevich would have at least answered the email, you know. Never happened, and so I just retired, and it's been a happy retirement. I still hang out with the Guard some. I'm involved in employer support of the Guard and Reserve,
And you were Brigadier General for how long?
From 1996, I guess it would be, to 2003.
So under 2 governors.
Yeah, really. I mean, I was there for part of the time that Governor Blagojevich was in, because I resigned from the state position because I thought he should, like any governor should, be able to appoint those people who get appointed to those positions. So I sent him the resignation letter, never got a response. But militarily, you wear 2 hats in that position. Militarily, I was the commander of the Illinois Air National Guard. We had a war going on. We couldn't get the governor to pay attention to the fact we had a war going on. Excuse me, he's probably your boss. But I mean, we couldn't even get an answer. So when it got really close to the end of the year, because the guy that took my place was running out of time, or he would have not been able to even take that place, I just went ahead and said, you've got to appoint him. I mean, we convinced everybody in the system, I've got to go so you can appoint him, because if he goes past the 31st of December, he can't do that. He's out, so you're losing 2 people. And so, what can I say?
So are you working currently?
I'm totally retired. We have a little farm. I go out, I've restored a barn, I've restored a house. I do some work with different organizations, the YMCA, and real involved in Rotary,
And
Goodwill, some of that kind of stuff.
And you're involved in the American Legion?
Yeah, I'm not as involved as I should be, for sure. I mean, they just called up and said, hey, would you come and do this thing? And I go, I'm not a veteran. They go, sorry, we're tired of hearing that. You know? So that's the way it is.
Well, I would like to thank you for your time. I really would like to thank you for serving our country.
Oh, thank you.
And I would like to thank you for your dedication to our company.
It was fun. It was really my pleasure to have a career like that. It really was. I mean, it was fun. It was really fun. Never did the same thing 2 days in a row.